The hypocrisy argument and its limits. Logic in the AI distillation debate. Popularity of large language models is a fairly recent phenomenon, and thus there are gray areas where existing ethical standards and legal frameworks do not neatly apply. Distillation is one of them. Distillation is essentially when a smaller student model is trained to replicate the performance of a much larger teacher model. Frontier AI labs routinely distill their own models to create smaller, cheaper versions for customers, yet most proprietary providers explicitly prohibit competitors from distilling their systems. Because this issue intersects with nationalism and geopolitical competition, discussion quickly becomes emotional. Accusations of hypocrisy and moral equivalence often overshadow careful reasoning. As both a data scientist and a philosopher, I am less interested in defending any particular company than in clarifying the logical structure of the debate. My aim is to identify where arguments rely on fallacies or conceptual conflation, and to bring analytical discipline to a controversy that too easily drifts into rhetoric. DeepSeek takes fish from OpenAI's own bucket? The controversy surrounding model distillation between China and the United States traces back to January 2025. At that time, the Chinese startup DeepSeek released a large language model, LLM, that performed on a par with its American counterparts, despite a remarkably low training cost of approximately $6 million United States dollars. This massive price discrepancy led certain experts to suspect that DeepSeek had cut corners by distilling outputs from existing models rather than training purely from scratch. However, when OpenAI accused DeepSeek of distilling outputs from ChatGPT, critics quickly responded with a pointed visual metaphor: a cartoon depicting OpenAI fishing freely from a vast public pond, only to complain when DeepSeek takes fish from OpenAI's own bucket. Anthropic accuses DeepSeek, Minimax, and Moonshot AI of distilling. A similar episode happened in 2026. In February 2026, Anthropic published a blog post accusing three prominent Chinese AI labs, DeepSeek, Minimax, and Moonshot AI, of creating over 24,000 fraudulent accounts and conducting over 16 million exchanges with Claude, using a technique called distillation. According to Anthropic's report, the campaigns used fraudulent accounts and commercial proxy services to access Claude at scale while avoiding detection. In one case, a single proxy network managed more than 20,000 fraudulent accounts simultaneously, mixing distillation traffic with unrelated customer requests to make detection harder. DeepSeek, across about 150,000 exchanges, targeted Claude's reasoning capabilities and even sought help generating censorship-safe alternatives to politically sensitive queries. Moonshot AI, across 3.4 million exchanges, targeted agentic reasoning, tool use, coding, and computer vision. Minimax drove the most traffic, over 13 million exchanges, targeting agentic coding and tool use capabilities. Anthropic detected Minimax's campaign while it was still active. When Anthropic released a new model during the campaign, Minimax pivoted within 24 hours, redirecting nearly half its traffic to capture capabilities from the latest system. Anthropic warned that models built through illicit distillation are unlikely to retain safety guardrails, meaning dangerous capabilities could proliferate without protections, potentially enabling things like bioweapons development or malicious cyber activity. Anthropic's accusations follow a similar memo by OpenAI to US lawmakers earlier in February, claiming DeepSeek had been improperly distilling its models as well. Anthropic is also using the allegations to argue for tighter chip export controls on China, saying the scale of these attacks requires access to advanced semiconductors. Is Anthropic hypocritical and inconsistent? The allegations haven't been without criticism. Many commentators quickly pointed out what they see as hypocrisy and an uncomfortable symmetry. Anthropic itself has faced accusations of overreaching in its own data collection, including a $1.5 billion copyright settlement with authors in September 2025. In June 2025, Reddit sued Anthropic, alleging the company bypassed its terms of service to scrape site data for commercial training purposes without paying. OpenAI was also accused of transcribing over 1 million hours of YouTube videos to train GPT-4. Further, Meta reportedly trained its models on pirated books. Internal chat messages allegedly showed that Meta executives knew this was illegal but proceeded anyway. Google and xAI did the same. Both companies have faced lawsuits for scraping pirated books and other copyrighted materials for AI and search training. Critics argue that U.S. firms defend their own sprawling data collection under the banner of fair use while pushing for aggressive enforcement against foreign competitors. However, the very models like Claude that the Chinese companies are distilling were built using data that Anthropic did not have the rights to use in the first place. Further, under current U.S. legal interpretations, AI-generated content is not copyrightable because it lacks human authorship. Therefore, distilling an AI's output may not actually be illegal. The logical misstep. 2 quoque and 2 wrongs. While the argument that American AI companies are simply doing the same thing serves as a powerful rhetorical counterpunch, it ultimately fails to provide a logical justification for the actions of others. This line of reasoning is a classic example of the 2 quoque fallacy, Latin for you too, which attempts to discredit a claim by accusing the speaker of hypocrisy rather than addressing the actual merits of their argument. In practice, this fallacy functions as a distraction. It shifts the focus from the validity of the critique to the character of the critic. A common domestic example is a son who, when told by his father to study harder for college, retorts, "You were lazy too. You never even finished school." To examine this principle on a broader scale, one might consider the geopolitical history of the 19th and early 20th centuries. During this era, nations like France and Belgium engaged in the widespread colonization and invasion of other countries. However, when Nazi Germany later invaded those same nations, their own history of colonial aggression did not deprive them of the right to protest the violation of their own sovereignty. This comparison is not intended to morally equate AI companies with colonists or war criminals, but rather to illustrate a fundamental point. Even if an actor has engaged in ethically contested conduct in the past, they do not automatically forfeit their standing to object to separate subsequent forms of harm. Furthermore, prior misconduct, whether real or alleged, does not serve as a universal license for others to engage in their own misconduct. If the baseline for acceptable behavior is simply whatever the last person got away with, the result is a rapid race to the bottom that erodes all ethical and legal standards. In the context of the AI industry, the fact that one company may have bypassed permissions to scrape the internet does not ethically authorize another entity to systematically distill that company's proprietary models against its terms of service. Ultimately, the principle remains clear and uncompromising. 2 wrongs do not make a right. Selective enforcement and the charge of inconsistency. Critics, however, are often making a subtler claim than simple justification. Their concern centers on selective enforcement. If American AI firms defend expansive data ingestion under doctrines such as fair use, while simultaneously advocating aggressive enforcement measures against foreign competitors for distillation practices, observers may perceive inconsistency or double standard. The issue here is less about excusing distillation and more about credibility. When firms operate in legally and ethically contested spaces themselves, calls for strict enforcement against others can appear strategically motivated rather than principled. This does not invalidate their complaints, but it complicates the moral posture from which those complaints are made. No double standard. While the preceding counter-argument is valid to some certain extent, it is crucial to point out that the American AI companies accused of unauthorized data scraping did not operate with impunity. Rather than being shielded by the legal system, they were held accountable through the courts. As previously noted, Anthropic was compelled to pay $1.5 billion in damages to settle its copyright infringement claims. This demonstrates that the US legal system did not apply a protective double standard to favor domestic AI firms, but instead subjected them to the same rigorous standards of liability as any other entity. Structural asymmetry between training and distillation. Importantly, there is a meaningful structural asymmetry between training on publicly accessible data and extracting outputs from a proprietary model through coordinated circumvention. Training typically involves ingesting material that is publicly available on the open internet, even if copyright questions remain unresolved. Distillation campaigns that rely on fraudulent accounts, proxy networks, and deliberate evasion of safeguards, by contrast, target a closed system whose outputs are governed by contractual terms and technical protections. The mechanisms, intent, and institutional contexts differ. One practice raises unresolved questions about copyright and fair use. The other may involve breach of terms of service, deception, or other forms of deliberate access circumvention. The categories are not identical, even if both involve large-scale knowledge extraction. To collapse these distinct practices into a single moral category risks equivocation, shifting the meaning of a term, another common logical fallacy, because it relies on treating different forms of access and control as if they were conceptually interchangeable. Public data versus proprietary systems. The distinction between public data and proprietary systems is therefore central. Publicly accessible content exists within a domain where reuse, transformation, and aggregation have long been debated but are structurally possible without breaching access controls. Proprietary AI systems, however, are gated environments. When actors create thousands of accounts or route traffic through commercial proxies to extract model behavior at scale, the issue shifts from interpretation of reuse norms to intentional circumvention of access boundaries. This does not settle the legality of either practice, but it underscores that the ethical terrain differs in kind, not merely degree. A useful metaphor is the cookbook versus restaurant kitchen analogy. Imagine a chef who studies thousands of publicly sold cookbooks, internalizes techniques, and refines their own culinary style. Some authors may object that their recipes indirectly fuel commercial success elsewhere, and debates may arise about attribution, originality, and transformation. Now imagine another chef who sneaks into a rival's private kitchen, observes the preparation of a signature sauce, and reverse engineers it for competitive advantage. Even if the first scenario raises ethical questions about large-scale reuse of published material, it does not justify covertly extracting proprietary processes from a closed environment. The two situations share a theme of learning from others, but they differ fundamentally in access conditions and intentional boundary crossing. Conclusion: a morally ambiguous frontier. Ultimately, the AI ecosystem operates within a morally ambiguous frontier. Large-scale data training, model distillation, intellectual property law, and technological acceleration intersect in ways that strain existing legal and ethical frameworks. Accusations of hypocrisy do not automatically negate legitimate grievances, yet moral outrage becomes more complex when all major actors navigate gray zones. Recognizing structural differences between practices while resisting the temptation of the two quoque and equivocation fallacies allows for clearer reasoning. In a rapidly evolving technological landscape, consistency, transparency, and principled argumentation matter precisely because no participant stands entirely outside ethical ambiguity. What is your take on this unfolding debate? Is the inconsistency of American AI companies significant enough to strip them of their standing to complain about their Chinese counterparts? Or do we need to look past the U2 arguments and establish an entirely new legal framework to regulate the specific mechanics of web scraping and model distilling? The intersection of international competition and intellectual property law is rapidly evolving, and I would love to hear your perspective on whether we are witnessing a race to the bottom or the birth of a new digital standard. Please leave your thoughts and insights in the comments section below. If you found this presentation helpful, don't forget to share, like, and subscribe. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.